Hey, what's up, guys? I got this book once again, man. I gotta give a lot of credit to TwoMorrows Publishing. They do a lot of the magazines. Like I think Roy Thomas is behind that. But this is a hardcover, the Monster Mash. Keep talking about the Monster Kids. Okay. And the guy even gives this writer here. I've heard of him before. The writer gives the creepy kooky, right? Right, that's like from the Adams Family theme song, Monster Craze, like the Monster Kids in America, 1957 to 1972. He gives a time period of that. It's interesting. 1972. I am not around yet. Let's say, uh, and looking at this is a really good in terms of the visuals. Right, I like a lot of pictures, but the reason why is like I'm a visual. I consider myself a visual artist. Okay, not maybe not a great one, but I consider myself a visual artist, and I always say I would love to see the artwork done for even for like the consumption. I mean, let's be honest, it's all post-war, decadent. Well, post-war, consumption of a now dying demographic, in a dying culture, let's say. Uh, but the artwork, I'm always big on the artwork done, even for as a things for a commodity, whether they're comics or whether they're the box cover art of models or toys or games. I could just look at that all day long. So anyway, we go in here. It's got the very first format. They are top notch. They put out top notch stuff, and they pretty much really go through the history of it. Now, exactly. I remember seeing this guy at Chiller Theater walking around, old as hell. He was like essentially he was one of the first horror hosts. Of course, the apparently the first horror hostess was Vampire, right? Oh, the feminists now love to bring that up, but a guy from Philly, a lot of Philly action in this here. Uh, the whole idea is that, okay, the post-war era. I like what they bring up is that it's not to the late 50s, right? You can start to see they always bring up the mythical 50s. Oh, everybody living in suburbs, and the conservatives fetishize it, and the leftists love to critique it. I am on the latter. Right? I believe in the latter of critiquing it, but from a different position. Okay, and just to bring up Skal, the late David J. Skal again. All this, you could say, prosperity, disposable income, the Bernays, marketing, advertising, bringing up demographics, the psychology of let's label and make people aware that they are part of a particular group, and let us market to that group. Now, I'm not saying that this is all entwined with that. Okay, nothing is as planned as that, but essentially is in that sphere. So, by the late 50s, you start to get where the kids are getting into monsters, regular kids too, not just like just outsider loners like myself. And the whole point is that at this point, there was still kind of like a public, right? The parents, the authorities, the churches, which still had, I guess, a degree of a say in the lives of Americans. They were not really fond of this stuff, So the harbingers of the monster craze. Of course, I actually have this. I got this for like $1. This edition, the classic literature, paperback reprints in the 50s. These things still sell even now. These things still sell. That should tell you something, right? Poe, Mary Shelley, Robert Louis Stevenson, H.G. Wells. A shock to this. I want to just bring this little thing up here. The monster craze would achieve the unthinkable with mainstream monsters. Before that, they were frowned upon parents, educators, and clergy, right, and politicians, right. So you had the hearings, right. With the horror comics. Actually, half of it was crime comics. Frederick J. Wertham, who was a German who had fled the Nazis, was now saying that these things were contributing to juvenile delinquency. And it's interesting, I didn't even know this. Leave It to Beaver, obviously that was way before my time, but there was an episode Well, they bought these monster sweatshirts, and they went to school. They said we're all gonna go to school with them, but only the Beeve went because he's a sucker. He got in trouble, so there was a whole thing on that. I thought that was interesting, you know. So now, of course, the horror comics, the crime. Remember, the big thing here, look, they go, oh, horror, horror. But what is this comic? Is this horror? This is crime suspense stories, right? So a lot of that stuff. And you can always say, like, horror is a metaphor. Like, a friend of mine's like, oh, I don't like horror movies. Life is a horror. I understand his position. Like, life is horrible enough. I don't need to see horror movies. Meanwhile, he likes crime movies. He likes oh, there's a Russian gangster film. Filmed in Moscow. I like crime is fucking real. So I don't like crime. I didn't watch the Godfather movies until later in life. I don't like that shit because I grew up with that shit. So just a little side note. No offense either way. And they mentioned it in 1957. Now what is this year? The pivotal year. I Was a Teenage Werewolf came out. That's actually a good movie. Michael Landon. That's actually a good movie. Also, I mentioned before the Shock Theater, right? The Screen Gems Shock package, where they sold all these Universal horror films, everything from like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, to Chinatown Squad, the Man Who Cried Wolf, what else? Pillow of Death, oh, that one, The Frozen Ghost. So it was a way to get their big name stuff and also their lesser known stuff, to say the least, to movie theaters. But when they to TV, right? The fledgling TV networks. What does television need? They need content. What's the best content? Content that's already made. You don't have to spend a lot of money on it. Right? So that was what happened. And Shock, this package thing, of course, it was sent to like the lesser channels, right? Not the major networks. Like, so it was very local. I keep talking about the localism. Right, Channel 9, New York, which is really, everyone knows it's not really New York, it's Secaucus, New Jersey, but like literally you could see Manhattan, from the wetlands, right? And it was a huge ratings boost, okay? And it went from, eventually there was a late night showing thing, right, which never went away, to showing them in the afternoons. So they bring up other things too. In 57, of course, the Curse of Frankenstein from Hammer, right, came out. What a film. What a great film. So anyway, we go through. See Zachary, he passed away. He lived for a while, long time. So very interesting story, right? The localism. I mean, the stuff was shot live, right, with the video cameras. And here was, right, she was hosting horror films in the early 50s or 54, right? Vampira, right? Yeah. Pretty much the goth girl. I mean, she was trying to also look like, what's her name from the Addams Family, Morticia, right? And also from the bondage art. Anyway, going through, right? I mean, I don't want to spend forever on this. Right? Famous Monsters of Filmland came out in 57. This was huge. There was a snowstorm going on, and it's still sold out. The music, right? The unholy alliance of rock and roll and monsters. So you remember that? Remember the horror party beat? That is a very underrated film. Look at these dudes. That's punk right there, man. I want to hear it. The Standells, remember? The Monster Mash. What is it? Where is he? There he is. Boris Pickett. The Monster Mash. Right, and they talk about the novelty Halloween songs. There's a bunch of them. Right? Dr. Demento had a bunch of them, but the Monster Mash will still be played today. And it's a good song. It's a fun little song here, and I like how he had the idea and for the song, and the labels all turned it down, so it went. The guy they knew, the only guy we knew in the music business, released it on his own, and then locally in California, it was very popular, and then eventually the record company bought them. That's how it used to be. Remember, that's how Rush got big in America. A Cleveland station was playing Working Man all the time. That's how Rush got big in America. In Canada, they were nothing. So anyway, it's typical thing you go through. You got the Aurora kits. I want to get one of these. So they don't seem very complex, but there's a lot you can do with it. Of course, these were cool. The artwork, I keep mentioning the artwork. I could look at artwork alone of it. I like how the Wolfman here has little ears. I always remember that little thing. And there's the artist. And it's funny too. Parents eventually got mad, not because of the gruesomeness apparently, but also because the what was inside didn't look like what was on the cover. That's interesting. Although this was a little much. I always thought this was hilarious. It really works. Chamber of Horrors, Madame Tussauds, Guillotine, La Guillotine. Right? It's harmless fun. It's harmless. And of course, I didn't know this either. Reading this book, you always find out something new. Apparently, this was a big deal, right? They were very concerned about these Godzilla, King Kong, right? And they still sell these now. The creature. The concern was that they were naked. So now, is that really true? You know what? I'm taking the guy's word for it. I wouldn't be surprised. All right, so going through the these, I remember Super 8s. Okay, if somehow you got your hand on a projector, right? They had little truncated like versions of the films, usually mostly silent and obviously edited heavily to get the narrative in a 15-minute runtime. They say about 200 feet. It was about 15 minutes, so that's how the length was. Interesting. And these were big. I remember seeing these. I didn't know anyone that had a projector or any of these, but I had seen these around somehow. I don't remember how. Taking their final power at this time now in the 50s into the 60s into the 70s, many of the guys, the actors in these horror films from the 30s and 40s in particular, they were starting to pass on. Of course, the most famous, the most successful was Mr. Karloff, right? Boris, Henry William Pratt. Very interesting. If you said he was Italian, you would be like, hey, okay, he was half Indian, right? Anglo-Indian family. It's always interesting. I keep recommending the Karloff documentary that they had made. I forgot what it was called. You could get it on Tubi. It was really, really good. Of all his brothers, he looks the most European, actually. But ironically, he was the one that pursued the very, un-British sort of, being an actor in Hollywood. His brothers were all essentially part of the empire. They were emissaries, and they were, I think, in the military. So, anyway, and Karloff, and look at all the comics they made. The Gold Key, man. Look at this. Anyway, of course, this Grinch, right? So at Christmas, this guy, you always hear his voice at Christmas. Mars Attacks. I remember when they revived this. I thought this was a huge thing. Apparently, this came out and was like, they stopped making it because you had horrible things like this. No. So it's like the America getting destroyed and invaded like it had done to my mother's people's country just a decade earlier. Oh, what are you bringing up? Hey, at least we got bubblegum. Remember all the cards, your baseball cards, but even these, it was always in a pack. You didn't know what you were going to get. You would trade it with your mates, right? And you would get a stick of that bubble gum in it. And they're really hard bubble gum. Anyway, I could go on this forever. The Don Post masks. The ones I remember, the cheap ass $2 mask. I love. You need cheaper still. There was always Ben Cooper. I mean, I don't know the name of the ones I got as a kid that my mom would get me, but they were very cheap. And essentially, right, costumes, right, were glorified aprons, right? You had an apron in rayon taffeta, right, that were flammable, and the crackled vinyl mask with a rubber band that fixed to your face, right? Right. So crossing the street, right? They right. You didn't wear these again. Like these usually didn't last throughout the big night, as they call it. Right. You crossing the street. Well, trick or treating was a life and death proposition. Every kid stuck their tongue through the mask's super tiny mouth. Yes. And also, what they didn't mention was, I remember, if you remember this, if anybody, the eye holes, right, on the inside, right, the ridges were very sharp, so they would hurt your. I mean, I never got my eye sliced or cornea scratched, thank God, but they would cut like your eyelid. They would cut your around your eye. Yeah, it would cut you if you didn't have it, if you moved it a certain way. So once again, look at the art. There's an Outer Limits game from Milton Bradley. Look at this, man. Look at this. I didn't even know this existed, man. Alright, I gotta do another vid. Yeah, it's that time.